Welcome to the late set from WRTI. My name is Nate Chinen. I'm here with Nicole Sweeney and the great Kassa Overall.
Yeah.
What's up, Kassa?
Hey.
What's up, man? I'm doing good, man. Running around, back to running around.
That's right.
So we are on stage at Solar Myth, just moments before your album release show for Cream, which is a pretty remarkable record.
Thank you.
Nicole and I were just talking about it, and like what this album represents, especially for the kind of listener that we both are, and that I know you are, somebody who has been listening to hip hop most of their life, and about as long as they've been listening for the samples and tracing those threads, you know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it feels like a flip side of something that you've been investigating for a long time.
That's right. I've been saying recently, it's a mirror image album of all my other work so far. When I first started making my own albums in charge of my own albums, I was like, man, there's so many different ways to connect these genres of music besides the ways that we've been doing, besides the obvious way. And there's nothing wrong with the obvious way. There's nothing wrong with taking a couple chords and looping that up and playing a hip hop beat over it. You know what I mean? That's kind of like our way into a hip hop jazz fusion kind of a thing. But I think because I've not only been chopping up beats for many years and writing rhymes and studying lyricists and playing gigs on drums for many years, I think that I started to go like, but there's so many other ways to connect these musics that are connected, that are the same ultimately, So even on my other albums, the idea of, rapping over a ballad, but leaving the ballad instead of chopping it up, was kind of like the same, like, thought experiment. So this is like, okay, well, let's just actually go backwards. So let's take hip hop as the material, as the information source, and let's apply all our aesthetic, inclinations and abilities to make a record, that you would call a jazz record, a record that sounds like it could have came out in the 60s, which is even before some of those samples that the hip hop artists sampled is, some of those were 70s and 80s. So, yeah.
It's interesting. In listening to the album, I kept saying, wow, these songs sound like they were composed by Benny Golson or Jimmy Heath or Wayne Shorter. I mean, they have got the straight ahead element all up and down and through it. But then there's something that catches my ear and I'm like, wait, I love it when you call me Big Papa. Of course.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And, I often say that hip hop is my best friend that introduced me to the love of my life, which is jazz. I'd love to know your relationship with both genres individually and collectively, which I think really leads us to this album.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's all interesting. So for me, hip hop became popular in the world stage as I was coming into the world. I was born in 82, so 86, 88, 87, I'm, 4, 5, 6 years old. So hip hop was like it was like, that's me, you know what I mean? It's like, we're going into the world. But my dad and my mom and my brother he's 4 years older than me, he played drums. So they all were like, here's Kinda Blue. Here's Now's the Time. Here's Giant Steps. Here's Eddie Jefferson. Here's Moody's Mood for Love. And so all of that stuff was right at the beginning for me. As I'm learning to speak English, I'm learning these elements. And the strange thing about it, because there's also this social and cultural element the strange thing about it was those two things just were like separated. And I've always, the metaphor I've always used to describe it is like two trees that grew up, and then as I got older, the branches started to go like this, right? But there's another one I've been thinking about recently, which was like when you have magnets, and on one side they come right together, right? But then when you put them like this and they don't want to come together, that has been my experience with hip hop and jazz in the world, because there's just certain elements of rap, hip hop, electronic music that they just don't want that on the festival. You see what I'm saying? Like, nah, like not the auto-tune pedal, you know? It's like, nah. And then when it comes from the jazz side, similarly, it's like there's just it has to be a certain thing to work on either one, you know? And so being somebody that just wants to make stuff and wants to be an integrated creative person, I'm not feeling that, you know what I mean? So I'm pushing back against that, you know?
I mean, do you feel that there is also a complicated interaction between, you know, hip hop as a musical form and jazz as a musical form? Because you've gotten under the hood, you know?
Yeah,
like
right.
You've really like worked with the substance of both.
I really don't. That's the thing, is I don't think that there is a complicated interaction or the integration of the two. I don't think it is really that complicated. You know, like when you look at it from the perspective of African rhythmic DNA, you know, I got that from Nick Payton, but where you have this rhythmic language all the way from West Africa through Pan-African, you know, through all the different diaspora and all the different genres in America up to today, you know what I mean? They all line up. The way that Andre 3000 raps lines up with the way that Coltrane plays, lines up with the way the lead djembe plays. When you got the West African, like djembe. I remember I went to West Africa, I went to Gambia to study for 2 weeks. And we got to study with a master, and I'm playing the Doon Doons, holding down the beat, and I'm just hearing the patterns they're playing. It's like exactly the same language. Not like, oh, that's kind of similar. That was a Neptune's beat. You know what I mean? It was like, and it was like, in the way the people in the crowd, the way the people reacted, it was the same reaction, you know? And that's so when you're dealing with it like that, then you're like, okay, so the differences are like kind of surface, you know, they're kind of patina differences, you know, so.
Well, so a quick story. In June, just a few months ago, I was in San Francisco for the SF Jazz Festival, and I was excited to see you. Didn't know what you were bringing, and you hadn't announced this album yet.
Right.
And I was there. I have a good friend named Jeff Chang, who is a hip hop scholar. He wrote "Can't Stop, Won't Stop" and a bunch of other things. And so Jeff lives in the Bay Area, and I was hanging with him. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I want to see Kassa." I found him on Spotify or something.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, you're gonna like this." So you hit with your band, and I think you might have opened with Freedom Jazz Dance.
Yep.
And within a few minutes, or a few bars, Jeff goes, "Oh, Far Side," and I'm like, "No, Miles Davis," like Eddie Harris. But we were basically both responding to familiarity with what you were putting together, and we were both right, of course. But I loved that moment because he was coming at it from his expertise. I was coming at it from mine, and your music, the way that you arranged the material, really allowed for those multiple points of entry.
Right.
And it struck me that like maybe that's, you know, a big part of your intention with this particular album.
Absolutely.
Is that the case?
Yeah, that's also part of my intention in general. You know, like even when I'm making a record, I'm very detail oriented. So I'm making a record for all the heads, right? For the three of us listening or having a certain conversation with the music, like, oh, that little intricate bit. but I'm also making it for like the Gen Z kid that knows nothing about it at all. And it's like, let's make sure it hits, or let's make sure, if I'm dealing with lyrics, like I don't want you to have to have done homework to dig it. I want you to dig it, and then you dig it so much, and then you start feeling like, what's going on? I don't know everything that's going on. There's what's going on here, and then you dig further, So I think that it's important to, I don't know, reference is just like a huge part of music, like the idea that everything we're making kind of comes from somewhere else. And most of the time we're dealing with harmonic language that's been developed over time, and rhythmic language that's been developed. And you can try to approach it from nowhere, and then you go hear Sun Ra or and Roscoe Mitchell, and you're like, oh man, they've been on this,
Yeah.
It's like you can't come from nowhere,
I was curious to know how you selected the music for this album. There's so many different hip hop songs that you could have taken and spun. I can imagine there is a reason for every single track, including Back That Ass Up.
Absolutely.
I need some detail
for sure
on how that one made it to the album.
We've been talking about, because a lot of this music can easily be played on jazz radio.
On the straightest ahead of jazz radio.
I was saying to Nicole, how are you going to back that ass up?
Yeah, well, technically it's AZZ, so you could say back that ass up, and nobody's got
to work on that pronouncer.
yeah. That back that AZZ up.
That's a good one.
Right, but I think that, and this is again, it's funny when I'm talking about this record. So many things are actually like just principles through all of my work, but it's all of the references are personal things, so that when I'm working on the music and playing the music, it triggers an emotional thing. Like we play Big Papa, I think about 7th grade. I think about when Art got in the car with my brother. Art was my brother's friend, and he hopped in the car and he says, yo, this is Biggie Smalls. Like, put this in. And my brother had a bazooka tube in his Honda Civic, the sub bass, And so I think the tape had Big Papa, and it had something off of Me Against the World by Tupac, And like the way those bass lines were hitting and we're just driving around, like I just thought that, like, I don't know. I thought that my whole world changed.
So there was no East Coast, West Coast feud in that car?
No, not in that car, And honestly, I don't think we ever really fell into that. We might have fell into who do you like better, Tupac or Biggie, but this was also a little bit before that. Yeah. But yeah, man, and like when I think about Wu-Tang and how it shifted my perspective, and I think about each one of those things. So the way I picked the songs was I just thought about things that kind of excited me emotionally. And then the other element was like how we were talking about those magnets. It would have been easier. It would have made a lot of sense to do like Diggable Planets, Tribe Called Quest, The Far Side, DJ Premier, Nas, like
the obvious
kind of jazzy hip hop kind of, you know what I mean? Dilla, right? But the thing about that is that like that's just one little bit of rap. And the reality is the beat that Manny Fresh made for Back That Ass Up was actually had the most harmony of all of those joints and was original with no samples. We think about Cash Money or we think about Dr. Dre, and because the music is coming from a rawer place and the topics and that kind of thing, we don't think of it like high quality art. You know what I mean? Like we don't necessarily draw from that the same way, because it's like it's almost those parts of the rap world are almost like it can fall into a joke space or like a like.
Well, that's interesting because so that makes me want to hear what you have to say about this sort of last 10, 15 years where Kendrick Lamar and Terrace Martin are taking G-Funk and bringing out all of the you know, the musical complexity in that form and kind of foregrounding it in a way that, I don't know if that's bringing like
great
respectability to that historical genre. You know, you think about
Exactly.
G-Funk in the 90s, I think you're absolutely right. But it's interesting to think about what's happened in this last several years, right?
Yeah, it's like case in point. It's like, what is the outgrowth of G-Funk? And then you go TDE, Kendrick Lamar, throw Anderson .Paak in there. So now you're dealing with the live elements. But if you zoom into what Dr. Dre was doing, he was bringing in live musicians and, you know, his production style, he was very intricate, you know? So even though he's up there talking wild, they were taking that stuff very, very seriously, you know? And I think that that's just a good kind of wisdom thing to think about when you're looking at the way a thing evolves, because it might start off like this, but then a person's life or evolution of what they're doing can grow into so many different things, you know, because whatever Kendrick Lamar's doing might inspire a philosopher that changes our whole world, right? But somehow Dr. Dre's connected to that, you know, and so it's just kind of that holistic, you know, as one people, we can't just take only the ones that are, you know, it's like you got to take them all and understand we're all like complex individuals and we all have like, you know, helpful things, bad things, and we all, you know what I mean? It's like that oneness, I think, is powerful.
I think of Wayne Shorter when he said jazz means I dare you. I feel like this album, you are so very daring on it. And as I was listening to Check the Rhyme, I was like, is this McCoy Tyner's Passion Dance? Am I mistaken? Was that where you threw Passion Dance in there? And I was like, of course that works. Talk to me about even just that process. Was that something that came to you? I mean, you're very intentional. That is, that's no secret. But I'm so curious to know where you heard Passion Dance as you're checking the rhyme.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like experimentation, you know, because if you listen to the beat, you know, that horn sample, I guess sometimes when I'm hearing, I can also hear it just more from a kind of rhythmic space or a melodic shape space, because I'm not all that harmonically advanced in terms of knowing what each little thing is, but I could hear that rhythm and the shape connection between that line and you know, the downs and ups. And so it just kind of was like, yo, could we go into Passion Dance? Like, what if we just did a little descending thing and we tried it and it just worked perfect, you know? And I don't think that people necessarily thought it would work, you know? And even a lot of the kind of demos and sketches I was coming up with, I don't think people really got it until we went back in the control room and listened to it. And they're like, oh, nothing but a G thing, but like Wise One. That's such a dope idea. But they didn't, we were literally recording it and I could tell they were like, so this how you want it? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm telling you, trust me, you know? And like that one, and also Back That Ass Up, like Back That Ass Up, but like Someday My Prince Will Come meets Take 5. You know, like you could type that into, like, you could almost like type that into an AI, you know, and it's like bop, bop, bop. And you're like, that sounds crazy, you know? So I think there's a lot of humor in it too. There's a lot of
perfect illustration of proof is in the pudding.
Yeah,
This record.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I want to talk about the collaborators that you have, because this is a killer band, first of all.
Thank you.
I think that seeing your gig in San Francisco was my first time seeing Matt.
Yeah.
And he has to do a lot in this band.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so can you talk about how this personnel makes it possible for you to make these connections.
I mean, Matt, I'd say Matt is like the right-hand man for this record in terms of the band, because I'm a drummer, right? So I have some ideas. He can help write out the charts and all that thing. And then like a couple of the songs he actually co-arranged with me. So he, brought in some new harmonies and new things like this. But having a piano player that's also a writer, arranger, orchestrator type of person is like a super powerful thing, because as you have ideas, you can ping pong it to him and he can, oh yeah, but you know what we should do if we can go around and come back out in this 2/5 and and end up in G, you know what I mean? And so like he definitely was extremely helpful in that process. And then I mean, a lot of this band has been part of my touring band for the past few years, Emilio Modeste is a little bit newer, but I've known him since he was a kid, like showing up at the Zinc Bar with Kojo, and Benji Alance on percussion. He's been with me for I don't know how many years, but like we've developed a language on tour that really makes it easy to have a sketch idea, but then like we have our way of communicating, so it's easy to get to something, Matt has historically played synth bass in my band, and to Makai McCraven's complaint, he's like, man, I just need a bass. I love it, but I just want to hear that bass. So because this album, when we're talking about making a jazz record out of a hip hop starting point, we started really adding like things that could really lock it into the sound we're going for. So acoustic bass, grand piano, let's get rid of the electronics and things, really like let it be this warm, woody, kind of thing. So the first thing I did was add a bass player, and that kind of opened up the whole palette. And so Rashawn Carter also is basically my first friend when I moved to New York. I moved to New York, and me and Rashawn practiced with Antoine Roney every day for about a year. Like every day, just, in there. And it was hard work, because Antoine really had a high understanding, and so he's another person that's been like a brother, and we haven't toured a whole lot. And now we kind of did this whole cycle and then ended up here in this moment, so yeah.
Was there anybody in the band who wasn't familiar with any of the original hip hop songs? You mentioned knowing someone since they were younger than you. Did you have to put any of them on to some of these classic hip hop songs, or were they knowledgeable?
I think there was some. I think there was a few, like Benji's older than me, and I feel like all of these, I think he knew them all. I'm not sure about Rashawn. Rashawn's kind of quiet, so if he didn't know, he might have just, okay, I'm gonna get it together. Emilio, he's kind of an old man, so he tends to know everything, you know what I mean? Like beyond his years. But if I had to call anybody out, I'd probably be Matt. Matt knew most of the things, but he's just, he's like a real inside the piano type. I could be wrong. If you're watching this, Matt, I apologize. But
we're not trying to call you out.
Nah. But I do know this. At one point, we were doing Aquemini from Outkast Aquemini, and he put a little chart together, and he said, "Yo, I got the Aquamini together," and I said, "Aquamini." So he didn't know how to pronounce Aquemini, so there I give him that.
With a couple of your other releases, it's been cool to watch the reception that your music has met with outside of the jazz community.
Yeah.
Like you've been embraced by, just as a shorthand, I'll say like Pitchfork.
Yeah, some of the other like, stuff. Yeah.
The people who are basically into, indie rock and underground hip hop and electronic music, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know whether you are gunning for a different audience with this one. Like, are you wanting to kind of infiltrate some jazz people who sort of were like, yeah, I know Kassa's a great musician, but like,
I can't play his
I
records.
can't get all the way with Animals, you know?
Yeah. This is for y'all. Or I don't know y'all,
No,
but this
not
is
us.
for not y'all.
I mean, it
this
is for us, but
Right.
This is for the jazz cats, you know? I mean, and the reason it's like that, and that's kind of another reason to do the rap covers, to use the rap songs as the basis, because it's not just making a jazz record. It's like it still has purpose in the arc of kind of my world. You know what I mean? And it is interesting, man, because I have people like I have somebody in Seattle, a radio host, and he's like, yeah, man, they don't, the station manager doesn't, yeah, they don't want to play it. It's like, do you got instrumental versions of like this song? You know, maybe we could play that. And I'm like, really? Like, don't you hear don't you hear the cymbal beat? You know? Yeah. But it's like, you know, people, like I said, it's like jazz has almost become a texture rather than a process. In some spaces, it feels like if it sounds like that, then okay, you know, that could be jazz. And it's a very interesting thing because you could have jazz mixed with chamber music and they'll boom, jazz. They'll play it on the jazz station. Jazz mixed with Cuban music, boom, play it on the station. Jazz mixed with, you know, it could be Bob Dylan, but jazz, play it on the station. But you mix jazz with hip hop, which is their grandson. No, you can't bring your grandson. You know he a problem. You can't bring him. But that's my grandson. I can't bring that's my kids. No. That don't mix. You know what I mean? And so it just, I remember actually feeling like really? Oh. I feel like a person being divided in half, you know? And so this is like my way of doing something that the jazz world can embrace, but then also kind of giving them a little riddle of like, well, if we could play this, why can we play this? Why should we be able to play this? You see what I mean? It's just an interesting thing to think about.
I say that this album is two of my life chapters really coming together in one. And I try to get my non-jazz loving friends to listen to Passion Dance, right? And they're just like, I don't know. But I feel like this is actually an album that I can play for them and kind of get them a little closer to jazz through hip hop. But I also feel like this is an album that might have some, and this is a stretch, but maybe some jazz purists listening to some of the original hip hop songs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I think the goal is in art for me is to expand people's ears and their palate, you know? And I think this is definitely has some potential in that kind of way. And there was a thought from earlier, it kind of popped in my head again, which was like my worlds, I was saying this before, my worlds were separated. So I was doing jazz gigs in middle school, and I also had friends that they would come and they couldn't get into it. Like culturally, they couldn't relate. Like, yo, what? Yeah, I mean, I'm good. You know, you doing the jazz thing, I'm cool. But they would also be in the basement with me trying to rap. You know, I make beats and I used to write raps for my friends and stuff, you know, so they were all into that. And so for me, I had these two worlds that were so separated. And so this album is also like, it allows me to integrate those worlds, you know, because if you can imagine, I had a drum set upstairs in the living room and a beat machine in the basement. And I didn't sample myself playing drums ever. Because I never would have thought, it's like a thing that it's so obvious that you would do that, but it just was two different worlds. And I couldn't even see it.
It's interesting. You said one was upstairs in a room and the other was in the basement. It's almost it almost is like a mirror of how jazz and hip hop is, right?
Yeah.
Jazz is up in this room and hip hop is down here, but there's such a stronger connection.
Yeah.
Jazz and hip hop should always meet in the living room.
They should meet. Yeah, they should
Right?
meet in the living room. That's right. Yeah, and it's all good. The thing about it is, there's always part of the thing is that there's work to do. Like part of the problem is also the solution. Like the problem of it is what allows us to even want to strive to, you know what I mean? So it's all good. It's all natural. It's just a product of history and how this all grew. But as time moves forward, we just keep finding new ways to,
One last question from me. You talk about that separation and how you've now integrated. But I'm wondering, is there a future version of this project where you are spitting again? Because that feels like the next step to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't think I've what's the word? Like I haven't really like seen it in my mind yet. But I do think that's definitely en route. We're en route eventually. I was with Gary Bartz and we were playing, and I was just so high off of playing tunes and stuff with him. I said, man, I think I just want to do this. I was like, man, forget all the beats and stuff. I'm going to just do this. And he was like, man, do that on this, because he's 80 something, and you know how Gary gets down. So he's almost like, bro, you can spit over this, and I'm like, oh man. But you got to see it before you can go make it. You really got to so it's coming, eventually.
It's interesting because Gary's been sampled.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's a hip cat right there.
Gary's prototypical in this conversation.
Well, thank you for this conversation. It's a real treat. And on behalf of everybody at Solar Myth, I mean, we're very excited to help you usher in this album. As we're speaking, it's just about to drop.
Yeah.
When this episode comes out, it will just have dropped. So I'm excited also to see what the ripple effect is going to be when it's out in the world.
Yeah. I'm excited, man. Go cop that. Go pick up Cream, Mel.
That's right.
It's out now.
It's out now only here at the gig, right?
That's right.
In person from Kassa Overall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you again for being on the late set.
Thank
we
you,
really
Kassa.
appreciate you, and we appreciate your time, man.
Man, thank you.
And
Glad to be
appreciate
here.
the music. Thank you for
Indeed.
doing this album. It's such a necessary set of music, and so many ears are going to be appreciative of both sides coming together
For sure.
the way you did it. So thank you for Cream Part 2. Am I hearing that coming up?
Let's do it. Let the people decide.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.